What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from Zoom again, and this time we got part two with Charlie of As Everything Unfolds. Great to be able to talk with you. Thanks for coming back.
That's all right. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, really looking forward to talking with you. Before we discuss anything, though, about the new album, did you see the My Chemical Romance reunion tour? Were you at, how many of their shows did you attend? Because I was at four of them.
So I was supposed to be going to the Milton Keynes Bowl one, which is awesome because it's not Milton Keynes Bowl, the Milton Keynes Stadium, sorry. But I was meant to be going, and then we got offered a tour with Enter Shikari.
Oh,
So I was like, well, I've seen my Chem before their hiatus. So I was sort of like, well, I'm not too, obviously I was gutted, but also I was like, I can't turn down an opportunity to tour with one of my other favorite bands to go and see another favorite band.
yeah,
So I still haven't
priorities.
seen them since, which I'm very gutted about, but because they have played at like the Eden Project in Cornwall and places like that. But I will one day. I mean, I've seen them before, so it's not like I've never seen them, but I need to see them again.
Yeah, yeah. I saw them on September 11th in New York City, which, and they played pretty much almost the entirety of Three Cheers and like so much off of Bullets. So, and
That's my jam. That
yeah.
is.
And then I saw them the other two times, and like it was just, I saw them three other times, and it was just an amazing experience. So, definitely the most memorable concert. It was my first time seeing them and worth the wait for nearly half my life.
Oh, good, good. I'm glad because I think they're one of those bands that people don't expect to be as good as they are live. Like I think a lot of people kind of pass them by as just kind of one of those bands, but they are really good live. Like they put on a proper show, and they just seem to really, now they've kind of come out their hiatus and spent some time away. They seem to be really enjoying themselves again, which I think is so important. When you're watching a band, you know if they're not enjoying themselves, and I think it when you watch videos of them now, they look like they did when they were like 20 years ago when they were really super into it. So I think that's really nice and refreshing as well.
Yep, definitely made up for lost times. But it's so great
Mm-hmm.
to be able to talk with you today because the last time I spoke to you, we were talking about Within Each Lies the Other, but now Ultraviolet is coming out very soon. This album is incredible. I can't wait for the rest of the world to hear it. But for people who haven't heard the full length album yet, with the five singles out, Flipside, Blossom, Felt Like Home, Slow Down, and the title track Ultraviolet, is that a good representation of what this whole album is going to sound like? Or is there a lot more tricks and twists, you would say, with the other unreleased tracks?
I think I'm sorry, I'm just putting my thing on Do Not Disturb. So I think it's one of those things where album tracks are probably more familiar to people. I think they're more kind of the kind of emo side of As Everything Unfolds, if you know what I mean. Because I know a lot of people have said stuff like, oh, the new stuff's like a bit different. It's a bit like it's not got that like edge to it. And I'm like, I think those people that were disappointed by the singles might really like the album tracks because I think it. So again, it's like we always try and balance everything quite well because we all listen to such a broad range of music and we've learned so much from our first album process. And although we picked the singles because we feel they were the strongest and we loved them and we felt like they represented overall the album, there are tracks for everybody. I think is kind of the best way to kind of put it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, like, again, As Everything Unfolds is one of those bands where, as everything does unfold, pun intended, that you're able to discover more and more within your sound and within your style. Was the intention to just make a continuation of Within Each Lies the Other in a way? Is Ultraviolet almost kind of like the sequel or the continuation of it? Or is this signifying like a new beginning for As Everything Unfolds?
I think it is. It's both. I think it's one of, like I said, it's kind of like a continuation in terms of we learned a lot and we wanted to take what we had learned from the first album and positive and negative and put it into the second album. And I feel like we have done that. We've tried to focus a lot more on choruses and because after the success of On the Inside on the first album, we were kind of like, well, what is it with that particular song that sits above everything else? And we were like, well, it's the hook. Like ultimately, it's the take all of my time, and the synth lead as well. Like we were kind of like, okay, cool. So let's take those two elements and kind of, build songs around that. So like Slow Down and especially Slow Down is like that because you've got the lead sort of musical bit is the synth, and then there's sort of like, we've got a lot of things going on vocally. Like we wanted like various hooks going on. and it's stuff like what is it, one of Ultraviolet is kind of like the chorus, and then you kind of got stuff like as I feel it, oh oh, as I feel it, like in the background. So it's kind of like a subtle like hook as well. So like I said, there was kind of like a lot of things that we took, and there's a song on the album as well called Rose Bouquets, which is actually kind of like a poetic song about saying goodbye to the first album lyrically. And so there are kind of that reference it, and it, you know, I don't want to like put the first album behind me and go, right, it's done now, forget about it, never want to talk about it ever again, because it's such a big part of what you do, especially a first album. So yes and no
Yeah, I would.
to that question.
Yeah, well, I would say that you know, saying goodbye to the first album lyrically, that is the Black Parade is dead sort of moment for you. So there you go.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. And you mentioned the hooks, and absolutely, like, I definitely think that you are a hook driven band, but I also think that the epic choruses that you have that are so anthemic, like Grayscale, was pretty much my number one song of 2021. In a way, I think it's very inspiring in a way, and the way that you have songs like Stay or Let Me Go off the last album also have an essence of emotion. So I think it's fair to say you're able to express multiple sides of yourselves with many different usages and techniques of your voice, right?
Mm. Yeah, it's just like I said, it's just all about kind of growing and learning and kind of and learning what works for us. You know, there was a lot of things that we've done that we sort of look back on and go, "Nah, that wasn't kind of what we wanted to do," and actually the response wasn't either. So it's kind of like, okay, well, let's put that never in the bin. Nothing ever goes in the bin. It just kind of goes on the back burner, and it kind of goes, right, well, maybe come back to that when time is right. And what we did do on this album, especially as well, is that we wrote a song. Well, we wrote the album to be an album, and I think that was the biggest thing that we did this time round that we didn't do the first time around. Because when we came to the track listing on the Each Lies the Other, it was a fucking minefield. It was so difficult to try and, you know, make the whole thing flow properly. Whereas this time we wrote songs so they would be openers and middle points and closers, and kind of really thought about that, because again, that's something you don't think about until you've written the songs and you go, fuck.
Fair enough, fair enough. I mean, there's always like looking back at the album and wondering, oh, we should have done that there. That's just a given with every single album. But I've noticed that with both Within Each Lies the Other and with Ultraviolet, like I thought that the photo shoots for both albums were extraordinary. Like I thought, you know, Within Each Lies the Other has sort of like a Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge sort of visual aesthetic behind it. But then with Ultraviolet, and you know, it's a color scheme that I've noticed has been prevalent. Like Misery Signals had their album titled that in 2020. So I've noticed that that's been sort of like a color scheme that has been resonating with you. And when it comes to the visual aesthetics of As Everything Unfolds, did you think of this image sort of like before you started writing the album, or did this idea sort of come to fruition as, you know, you were writing more and more songs and everything started falling into place?
It was this time round. It was before, or at least very early on, before we'd even sort of started, you know, thinking about artwork or photo shoots or anything like that, which was very handy because it meant that we didn't have to go back on anything. But this time around, so it was actually Ultraviolet. Sort of the concept is inspired. So I did a degree in photography, and I spent a lot of time in the dark room, and I've always been sort of like obsessed with the concept of like to sort of see things in color, you have to expose to ultraviolet light. So that's kind of like the idea behind the album. So although it is like the color purple and it's very literal visually, it's kind of got this underlying like meaning. So like the interlude track on the album is kind of referencing the concept. So all the samples of the sounds that you hear of a dark room. So we didn't want it to be like overtly like obvious what it was, because we're not that band. We like to kind of like keep, although I'm talking more openly about things this time, it's kind of like I like people to go listen to it and go, oh, like, what's going on here? And you know, because it is a little bit potentially jarring, but you know, the song Ultraviolet especially kind of lyrically ties into the concept as well. So yeah, but it kind of gave us like a good sort of point visually to work with. And there's lots of things that I wish we could have done, but budget didn't allow. But as it all ever does,
Yeah.
and then the cost of living and everything going up, it was never going to happen. But considering how much money we had to work with, and you know the team we have, and whatever, we've done such an incredible job of creating what we could create.
Yeah, absolutely. I've noticed that, like, with this album, and I think it could be said with the last one too, that you're able to kind of like approach things lyrically from both a very literal and metaphorical standpoint, right?
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
and depending on what the lyrical subject matter is about, or if you're expressing it more metaphorically or literally, does it resonate with you differently, and does it hit you differently when you're performing that material and writing it? Does it almost feel like it's hitting you in a different from a different angle?
Yeah, it's weird because like I think the best way to talk about it is like Rose Bouquet's the song lyrically is like not so much personal, it's kind of like poetic and more kind of from a third person perspective almost because it's writing about like a thing and a time rather than a particular feeling or like a particular thing that's happened to me. It is different. I don't know about I think live I'm kind of just in that zone and it's always happening and I can always put myself into a moment to kind of sort of relate to it. But it's it's a weird one because like everything kind of comes from here, but different places in here, if you know what I mean.
Definitely. Emily, I think also too, is it fair to say that when your music is out there, like Grayscale for me, I don't know what the sort of mindset was behind the making of that song, but for me that really meant a lot for me. That song came out during a very uncertain time with the pandemic, but I also felt like it was almost like a turning point in the pandemic when I first heard that song because, like we were kind of like emerging out of the darkest days of it. So I felt like, it does have a lot of context resonating with people. So when people relate
Mm.
to your music or have their own interpretations behind it, does that add another layer of context or add another layer of meaning to the material in a way?
Oh yeah, I always want people to kind of put themselves into what I write because it's like as much as people love hearing about me moaning about oh how horrible my life is, it's not. But
Hmm.
like all the words sound like that, and it's always very, very dramatic and everything. I like people to be able to put themselves in it because it just creates more of a kind of personal, yeah, just a sort of personal connection to it, which I think is very, very important for the listener.
Yeah, absolutely. And the famous saying, when you put a song out, it immediately becomes theirs. So
Yeah, no, it's good.
but you do write from a very emotional place, and you're not afraid to express your own personal demons on it, which I think is very inspiring as well. Obviously, it's very cathartic to express your emotions on the album, but does that also maybe make it a little deteriorating in a way as well? Because sometimes facing your own demons is just as terrifying as it is almost relieving to make art about it.
Yeah, I think this time around it was a lot less kind of um, just the kind of context of what I was writing about and just the time we were writing at. It wasn't as sort of draining on myself because the lyrical content, although sometimes can be a bit sort of melancholy, overall it's way more kind of like for me anyway positive and kind of like glass half full rather than glass half empty. And I definitely was in a much better place for writing. So this time around and I feel like people have said that it just feels more kind of exciting and I just sound as a group we just sound more excited to be writing, whereas last time it was definitely like a cathartic like process of oh we need to get this out of our system, we need to talk about these feelings. And it was weird because obviously we wrote those songs pre-COVID, so all of those songs were written way before any of the pandemic happened. So we went into recording the week before the first lockdown, so we didn't even know that that was coming. But weirdly it kind of like just seemed to resonate with people, especially in that those moments where you were at home, you were alone, you were sort of like didn't really we none of us knew what was going to happen, we didn't know how long it was going to go on for. And there are a lot of people who have said like certain songs like especially Grayscale and stuff like that have really helped them. But I feel like this time around it's the songs are will do that similar thing but in a different way. Like it's more kind of like pulling you up and being like patting you on the back and going, "Come on, let's go, let's do this," rather than sort of crying about it. We're now in the process of getting up and trying to face it.
And you led me perfectly into the next question because I've always said that art is life. And, when you bring it into the world, it could grow, it could develop, and even sometimes it could eventually die as well. Do you think that maybe the meanings or just the art itself could grow and develop as you evolve as an artist? Or do you prefer if every album that you make is more or less a snapshot of who you are at that particular time?
I'm kind of happy with both. Like I never sort of, my main thing in life, and I think as I'm getting older, I try to kind of do this more, is try not to plan too far ahead.
Yeah.
Because, and especially, you know, the pandemic has taught me that as well, because you just never know what's coming around the corner. And although you should be prepared for things, it's when people ask you things like, what's your 10-year plan? I'm like, why, who has a 10-year plan? Like, I don't even have a 1-year plan, because I have a 6-month plan, but a 1-year plan is even pushing it, because in the space, you know, for me, especially with what we do, things change so much. And I feel like for everybody, things have changed so much, and life is so different now. So just, and it makes it so much easier. And I feel like, so for me, like planning what the next album's going to be, I'm sort of like, it is what it's going to be. Like, I'm cool with it being one, I'm cool with it being the other, as long as it still sounds like us and it comes from the right place and we're happy about it and we like it. Thumbs up.
Yeah, because I mean, I still find that the Closure EP that you released in 2018 still has a lot of life and fire and context into it that's relatable. But you know, some people look at their earlier material and almost kind of want nothing to do with it.
It's one of those things that EP was very much like, I think we were teenagers still when we did that. Like, it was very much like that was the angsty kind of, you know, we've kind of had a bit of everything. We've kind of had like that angsty EP where I was angry at everyone pissed me off, hated everyone, hated the world. And then, you know, Welto was kind of like growing and kind of like sort of grieving for those things. And then now we're kind of coming into Develop. Like I said, it's like a much more sort of like, come on, let's go, let's get up, let's fix those problems, or let's kind of look at them from a different perspective rather than kind of cry about them. Because again, like, things I've learned is just, you can't dwell on things because it's just wasting your energy, and you've got so much more to give that energy to. And like I said, you know, I'm growing, and you will change, and you know, there will be people who look at me and go, no, that's impossible. You know, 19-year-olds who are like, I'm so, you know, I can't do this, I can't do that. I'm like, it does get easier. As you grow and you learn and you have life experience, things that used to bother me even 3 years ago do not bother me anymore.
I envy you about that because dwelling and grudges. I mean, I will say that the grudges that you hold could make for some great subject matter to address. Like, if I ever started a band, I'm not neglecting the shit that I went through in high school, even though I'm almost 30 now. So
Yeah,
like,
I think because I've dealt with it like in a song already, and I've kind of been through that, and like a lot of those processes I've kind of come out the other side of now, and I'm sort of like, yeah, I'm glad I had that moment, and it probably helped me. And now it's like, if anybody wrongs me now, I'm just like, no, okay, bye. Like, you know, I don't have the energy to kind of like write a song about it, be upset about it, be angry about it. Like, I'm just like, cut, done. You know, like I will just out, and then there is nothing to grieve. You know, it's sort of like, it's you know, I always give people chances. I'm not like a, oh, you wronged me once, that's it, I'll never talk to you. It's sort of like, if things keep happening and you sort of keep doing things that don't make me happy and don't make me feel comfortable, you know, I won't, like, you know, I'll just sort of like just drift myself away from it, and it's a much easier way of dealing with it. And for me personally, that's just a better way for me to deal with it.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, and that's a message that I think a lot of people need to hear now, because I could tell you that there's a lot of people who are still not recultivating friendships after 2020. So I think like it's definitely a message that needs to be addressed. And you mentioned too, like going back to like the emotions, because in the end, as everything unfolds, is a 6-piece band, and I feel like everything counts from the vocals to the rhythm to the guitar work to the synths. Does everybody in the band need to kind of feel the same way emotionally, or sort of like feel a similar way when making the music together to make it sound consistent? Or could maybe all of you being in different headspaces help enhance a song? Because when people tell me that they all mutually came together and, you know, oh, we all collectively did this, I really don't believe it. If you're in a band with 5 to 6 people and you're making 12 or so songs, there's gonna be some disagreement in there.
Yeah, I mean, we are actually a 5-piece now.
Oh, okay.
R.I.P. Owen. He's not dead. He's not dead. But like,
Yeah.
he's no, he you know, he's sort of like, as life gone on, he's kind of decided he doesn't want to do it anymore. We're all still very good friends and everything. So he makes his hot sauce for when we go away on tour,
Oh,
and
that's
we go
all.
and collect it on the way. Yeah, no, he's a good egg. But yeah, like in terms of the, like, yeah, I feel like we're never all in the same headspace, and I think it is a bit of a kind of, I mean, if you all are, then fair enough, but no one's ever at the same point in life, especially because we're all different ages, and we're all in different points of our life. Like John is significantly younger. I think he's like 23, 24, and then George is like 29. So it's like, you know, especially at 20, there's such a range of things going on. You know, some of us have got, you know, houses and pets and family and all these things going on, and no one's ever in the same space. But I think what we have learned to do is to kind of put yourself in the space of the other person, and just sort of like, especially with the way we've had to kind of like leave a lot of our jobs or change our jobs, you know, because of our touring schedules and stuff, we've had to kind of be a little bit more understanding of other people's situations in the band, and be more like, right, what do you need? What do you need from us that will help you? Instead of, you know, being like, you just need to do this. It's, what can we do to help? And it just, I don't know, like, it just kind of helps to create a nicer environment. And I feel like that was definitely, you know, with UV, it's just the whole process was just nicer. And again, although some of the subject matters, you know, were melancholy, we were all just in good different places. I think we're all kind of starting to settle in ourselves now, and kind of, we all kind of know ourselves, which makes it easier as well for working with each other, because, you know, we all really know each other now. I mean, we've been friends for 10 years, so you think by now we know each other inside out, but people do change. And I think, but like I said, we're all kind of getting to that point now where we're like, okay, this is getting easier now.
Awesome, awesome. And I got one more question for you, and this is going back to the sort of concepts and the lyrical aspects, because in the end, you know, we're going to be seeing as everything unfolds on tour, and you know, seeing these live shows, you're going to go into different parts of the catalog. You're going to bring some stuff off within Each Lies the Other, some stuff off of Ultraviolet, maybe even some deep cuts off the Closure EP, hopefully. But like, when you go all around the catalog and you know, you're circling back in different parts, does that bring also another layer of meaning? And does it almost feel like you're going through multiple uh, places in time in a way, or being that, you know, you're playing them on the same stage, and you know, you're playing in front of an audience, in the end the set list is just sort of like its own entity?
Um, yeah, it's kind of like, I think when we play the old and the new songs together, you can tell sonically that they're very, very different. But also, I just feel like when the set list is put together, it's made as like one piece, because, you know, we kind of create like interludes, and you know, I will talk in between the songs, and it will just kind of all flow into each other, which is one thing that I have such a big thing about, is I like the songs to kind of flow naturally, because it leaves less room for that kind of awkward, like those awkward like gaps in between, which is where you might kind of change your mindset and it might not feel right. Whereas I think when you just start it as one, almost treat it as one big song, and it's one big feeling, one big thing that's happening, it's much easier to kind of like deal with live, for me anyway. Like, other people might find it that they prefer to, you know, get into the mind space of each song, but I prefer to just kind of go through the whole thing as one big emotion.
One big experience.
Yeah, yeah.
So before we go, I want to thank you so much for coming back onto the show. Great to be able to talk with you again. I'm going to end this interview the same way I ended the last one. What else would you like to promote for as everything unfolds, and when the hell can you come to the States?
In terms of America, we are very much working on it. It's a very sort of big financial commitment, which we are, you know, sort of trying to figure out, and also just, you know, trying to get an agent and stuff to take us, which we're kind of in the process of doing. So we are, you know, I know people are so keen. We have such a big following in America, and I think a lot of people are potentially, you know, potentially not, don't understand that we are. It's a long process, but we are working on it. But other than that, we are doing Impericon tour next week. So there's bands like The Ghost Inside, The Art of Murder, lots of heavy bands, and us. Then we're back out with a band called Calhoun in Germany, and then we are doing some headline shows kind of in between. And same with the Impericon run as well. We're doing stuff with a band called Drag Thunder in between.
Oh, they're awesome.
And then and then we've got some headline shows, which are the kind of the big thing for us. In September, the 12th and the 13th of September, we're doing one big Manchester show and one big London show in the UK. We haven't done a big headline show for probably about, like, we did like a small headline run, but we haven't actually done a headline show for years. So it's going to be a big deal with trying to source confetti cannons and all that stuff. So yeah, it's going to be a big deal. And there's some other bits coming, but haven't been announced yet. So yeah. And we're doing some festivals. We're doing loads of festivals.
Yeah.
Just go on our website. There's too much.
Of course. And I got to bring out the pyro too.
Oh yeah. Obviously, just
Yeah.
set everybody on fire.
Oh, that'll be awesome. Then you get on that Rammstein tour. But thank you so much, everybody. As everything unfolds, Ultraviolet coming out April 21st. Be sure to pick that up. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.